They thought he built his house into the hill because he was hiding. What they didn't realize is that Earth can absorb and redirect force far better than exposed walls. When the avalanche hit, open homes were crushed instantly. His wasn't. The strange part? The design looked smaller, weaker, almost invisible, but it was built for something no one else prepared for. Most people prepare for what they've already experienced. They fix what failed last year. They reinforce what they've seen break before. They build based on memory, not possibility. But the real danger is rarely familiar. It's the kind that builds quietly in the background. The kind no one plans for because it hasn't happened yet, or hasn't happened in a way people remember. That's what makes this story different. Because what you're about to see isn't someone reacting to a problem. It's someone preparing for one that hasn't arrived yet. And when it finally does, the difference isn't small. As you watch, notice the exact moment when what looked unnecessary suddenly becomes the only thing that makes sense. Before we go further, answer this in the comments. Would you build for what usually happens, or for the one event that almost never does? Your answer helps this reach people who think ahead instead of just reacting. Now let's go back to a hillside where one decision didn't just change a house. It changed who survived. The man who built against common sense. It started in early autumn, when the air was still mild, but the mountains had already begun preparing for winter in quiet, subtle ways. A small mountain settlement, quiet, predictable, used to doing things one way. Homes were built in the valley, close to water, close to each other, easy to reach, easy to maintain. That's how it had always been, passed down without question. So when a man named Elias Carter bought land halfway up the hillside, away from everything familiar, people noticed immediately. And when he started hauling wood uphill, piece by piece, with no sign of stopping, they started talking, not quietly, openly, because nothing about it made sense. More effort, more wind, more exposure, less comfort. Everything about building uphill was harder, slower, and riskier. So why would anyone choose it, especially when easier options were right below him? The first sign. Something was different. At first, they assumed he just wanted the view. That was the easiest explanation, the kind people use when they don't want to think too deeply. Until they saw the foundation, and everything about that assumption began to fall apart. Because Elias didn't build his house on top of the ground. He cut into it, deep, carving a section of the hill itself, shaping it carefully instead of forcing it, then lining it with stone, thick stone, stronger than anything used in the valley, built to last. 3 walls went up like normal, logs, solid, heavy, but the 4th wall didn't exist. Instead, the hill became the wall, earth, packed tight, unmoving. The roof angled downward, blending into the slope. From a distance, the house disappeared into the land itself. And that's when people stopped joking and started questioning what he was actually doing. The question no one took seriously. One afternoon, a man from town walked up to him, looked at the structure, studied it carefully, trying to make sense of what he was seeing, then asked the question everyone was thinking. Why build into the hill? Elias didn't answer immediately. He just looked out toward the valley below, where everyone else had built their homes, then said something simple. Because the hill doesn't move. That answer didn't help. If anything, it made things worse. Because now it sounded like he was preparing for something no one else could see or understand yet. And people don't like what they don't understand. So they did what people always do. They laughed louder than before. What he saw that others didn't. But Elias wasn't guessing. He was watching the mountain above the town day after day, watching the way snow settled, the way it layered, the way it shifted after storms, slowly changing shape. Because every winter, something small happened, nothing dramatic, nothing dangerous at first, just enough to notice if you were paying attention. Snow would slide, not far, not fast, but enough to leave marks behind, curves in the land, lines in the trees, patterns no one paid attention to, except him, because he understood something simple most ignored. Snow doesn't fall forever. At some point, it moves, building for weight, not weather. By early winter, the house was finished, and from the outside, it still didn't look impressive or strong in the usual way. No big structure, no obvious strength that others could see. But inside, it felt different immediately. The air stayed warmer. The wind didn't reach the walls behind him. The earth blocked it completely, and the stone held heat long after the fire burned low, giving back what it absorbed. But the most important part wasn't comfort. It was strength. The roof beams were thicker than necessary, reinforced, overbuilt, designed for pressure, not just snow, weight, the kind most people never plan for because they never expect it, the calm before the reality. The first snowfall came quietly, light, manageable, just like every other year before it. People went on with their routines without concern, cutting wood, repairing roofs, laughing about the hill house like it was a joke, because nothing unusual had happened, not yet. And that's the thing about real danger. It doesn't announce itself early. It waits, quietly, until people stop expecting it completely. The storm that changed everything. Then the snow didn't stop. 1 day, 2 days, 5 days, 7, heavy snow, wet snow, the kind that doesn't sit lightly, the kind that builds slowly but relentlessly, and builds, until the mountain above the town began to change in ways most people couldn't see yet. Not visibly, not obviously, but enough for someone watching closely. Someone like Elias. He had already seen it before. The line, the fracture, the moment when snow stops being stable and starts becoming a threat. The moment everything broke. When it happened, it didn't feel like weather anymore. It felt like the ground itself was moving beneath everything. A deep sound, low, rolling, then growing louder until people turned instinctively and saw it, not falling, moving, an entire section of the mountain sliding downward, faster, heavier, unstoppable. Homes in the valley had no chance, no time, no protection, just seconds. And in those seconds, people ran, not toward safety, toward the only place that might hold. The house the storm couldn't break. By the time they reached it, the avalanche had already taken the valley. Everything gone, buried, crushed, silent. But the house was still there, unmoved, because the force didn't hit it the same way. The hill behind it absorbed the pressure. The earth didn't collapse. It held. The roof didn't break. It carried the weight, and the wind never reached the back wall. Inside, something impossible happened. It was warm, not comfortable, but survivable. And in that moment, nothing else mattered anymore. What they finally understood. People looked around that small space, at the stone, at the walls, at the structure they once called foolish and unnecessary, and they understood something they hadn't before. He didn't build it differently. He built it for a different problem, not for convenience, not for normal winters, but for the one winter that would test everything. And when that winter came, his house didn't resist the storm. It avoided it. They thought it was unnecessary, too much effort, too strange to make sense. But when everything else failed, when the valley disappeared under something no one could stop, that one decision didn't just stand. It became the reason anyone was still alive to question it. And that's the part that stays with you. He didn't build for comfort. He didn't build for approval. He built for a moment no one else believed would come. So before you leave, answer this in the comments. At what point did this stop looking like overthinking and start looking like intelligence? I read every answer, and what you notice shapes what comes next. And if you're someone who sees the value in things before they're proven, subscribe. Because the next story won't look important at first either.